All right, it's another great day for a podcast session. This is the Master Passive Income Podcast. My name's Dustin Heiner. I am so glad that you guys are here with me today. Now, at Master Passive Income, we talk all about real estate rental properties and how you can invest in real estate, make passive income every single month, cash flow that goes in your pocket without you working a job. That's right, it's an automatic business. My business is automatic, meaning it works without me. When I go on vacation for 6 weeks in Europe or Japan or go to 2 weeks in Alaska or whatever vacation I go on, I literally don't work. My properties work for me. My property managers who I hire, my contractors, my realtors, my inspectors, my bankers, everybody else works for me while I just reap all the benefits because they do all the work. Now, today's session, we're going to be talking about investing in crazy, expensive markets like Washington, D.C. There are actually ways to invest in places like Washington, D.C., San Francisco, L.A., and all these crazy places where the prices are really, really high, rents are really, really low, but there are ways to make money with real estate in these crazy markets. All right, let's jump into it. Let's start the show and get moving.
Welcome to the Master Passive Income Podcast, where we talk about all aspects of real estate rental properties with a special focus on making enough money so you can quit your job and live the dream life. And now, here is your host, Dustin Heiner.
All right, now I am super excited to share with you an investor that I met recently who actually invests in Washington, D.C. Now, before I do that, I had to bring something up to you. Now, I recently saw this board game that came out and it made me laugh. But at the same time, this board game gave me thoughts that this is a huge opportunity for us real estate investors. So the board game that came out is called Monopoly for Millennials. Monopoly for Millennials. Apparently, Monopoly thought this was a great idea to put out. Not saying if it's good or bad, but it just made me laugh. And you might be thinking, how can a board game actually give good opportunity for investors like us? Well, let me explain it. So if you don't know what Monopoly is a board game that you play against other people, and the goal of the game is to acquire land, these little square tiles, acquire land with money. You start with some money and you buy some land as you roll the dice. You go round and round and round. You buy land and then you buy houses to put on your land. And as people land on your tiles, you charge them rent. You charge them money. Anyways, I don't need to go into it, but that's basically it. It's teaching people how to invest in real estate. You buy one house, then two houses. Eventually you move up to a hotel or an apartment complex. And that's what we as investors try to do, is get more doors in a place, like going from a single family home to a duplex to a quadplex to a 40-unit apartment complex and so on. And so that's what Monopoly teaches you. The essence of Monopoly is all about real estate and buying land and using your money for you, which is what we do, which is great, right? Well, this new game that Monopoly put out, it's called Monopoly for Millennials. I could not believe it. I thought first, okay, that's interesting, Monopoly for Millennials. Let's take a look at it. But then I read the tagline. It literally says, forget real estate. You cannot afford it anyway. Can you believe that? It's telling millennials, like, this is literally a board game. It's not a joke. They made this. Forget real estate. You cannot afford it anyways. And so here's what they do. So Monopoly for Millennials board game it says adulting. Apparently that's a term. Adulting, being an adult is hard. Take a break from the rat race with this edition of Monopoly board game. So the board game it says it's a great choice for millennials to take a break from everything. Hey, everything's so hard in life, and so just take a break. And instead of accumulating land and properties and homes on that property, it actually says you win by creating cool experiences and going to cool places and going to really great things. You know, you can have experiences from sleeping on your friend's couch to going to a vegan bistro to a week-long Mediterranean retreat. And that's what you're getting is experiences. And it says it's all about experiences, not about real estate, not about providing for your family, not about making money so that you can go on these experiences. It's all about doing these experiences. And what's actually even more funny is, I'm a part of the millennial generation. Apparently, just in my age, I break down, I'm in the millennial generation. But apparently, a lot of the millennials, the current millennials that are like really identify with millennials, they're really offended by this. They're saying, hey, we're broke, but it's not our fault. So literally, somebody put this like on Twitter. I saw somebody, I literally write, hey, we're broke, but it's not our fault. Stupid millennial monopoly for millennials. They were irritated at that because they felt offended. Well, whatever. It doesn't bother me at all that somebody gets offended. But what's interesting is it's very true that millennials do not want to own real estate. They've gone through the 2008 crash. They've seen bad things happen. They possibly don't want to work hard for a property. I'm not saying that's true for everybody, but it just seems like there's a reason why they monopoly put this out, because they're seeing millennials wanting experiences as opposed to actual tangible wealth. Remember when I said that this is a huge opportunity for us as investors? My goodness, if nobody is buying houses, then where are they going to live? They're going to live in places that are renting to them. They're not going to buy the house. They're going to rent it. And so that's a huge opportunity for you and an opportunity for me, that there are fewer people buying homes. Homeowners, they're our biggest competition. Other investors are not our competition. There are so many more homeowners than there are investors. So you and I, we have this huge opportunity to buy properties, rent them to millennials who just want to have experiences. If they're going on a 2-week Mediterranean, or week-long Mediterranean retreat, which is one of the cool destinations in Monopoly for millennials. If they're doing that, then they're spending their money on that. They're not spending their money on a home. They're not making money to where they can buy a home. So you and I, we can buy homes for them, let them rent it from us, so they don't have to worry about adulting. I guess that's the term. They don't have to worry about adulting and buying a house, because that's hard. You and I could do it because we know it's easy. It's not necessarily easy. It's simple. The process is simple. We can do it. We can buy the property. We can get a property manager over that property and get a millennial in there to pay off our mortgage, to pay off our taxes, our insurance, all of our expenses, and put money in our pockets. I'm super excited that millennials really, or it seems like millennials don't like real estate. If they don't, I'm totally fine with buying the property for them, letting them live in my property, a nice property that's well taken care of, and they just pay me rent. I'm totally happy with doing that. So hopefully you're like me and seeing this as a huge opportunity that in the next, 5 or 10 years, maybe longer, we are going to have a bigger pool of renters and a smaller pool of competitors against on all these properties that are out there. So properties are going to get cheaper for us to buy. There's going to be more people wanting to rent, which drives up rent prices. I'm excited. On top of having, seeing this board game and laughing really hard that Monopoly actually thought this was a good idea. Apparently a lot of millennials are upset. But for you and me, it's going to be a great time to invest. If you are actively investing now or you're thinking about it, don't continue to think, start acting. Start investing, start buying properties, because this is a huge opportunity. I don't know how long it's going to last, but as soon as you see a property that you can make money on, you want to move on it because you want to get ahead of this, because this is just starting. Millennials are just really getting in the buying age where now they're not going to buy. Whereas normal red generations, they would be buying a property and living in it, getting married, having kids, settling down. Well, they're not, millennials aren't. So it's great for you and I to have a place for them to rent and make money from. You're going to get rich. You're going to get wealthy because millennials, they just don't want to adult. Apparently, this is what millennials or the Monopoly says. So you and I are going to get wealthy from this. All right. Now moving on from Monopoly for millennials. Recently, I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Lucas Hall. I met Lucas about a couple months ago, and he's number one, he's a great guy. I had really enjoyed talking to him. But number two, he's an investor. He's an investor that invests in Washington, D.C. When I first heard that he invests in Washington, D.C., I did a double take, basically. My jaw almost hit the ground. I said, how in the world are you investing in Washington, D.C.? Isn't that where all the money goes to? All of our politicians, they literally take our money and dump it into Washington, D.C. That's the capital. That's where all the money goes. It's rather sad. But I said, how in the world are you doing that? And he said, well, It's actually very simple. I rent it out per room. I said, you do what? And you actually make good money and they take care of it and all that sort of stuff. Well, I'm not going to get into it right now because he'll explain all that entire process. Really, really fantastic. On another side note, he is a part of a company called Cozy, C-O-Z-Y. They are a free property management software, literally free. Like it's completely free to use. I use it for my properties. So in the show notes, I will put in there the link to Cozy. You could get your free property management software. And if you'd use my affiliate link, it doesn't cost anything to you because it's free. It'll indicate that you're part of my listeners, and I'll get a little bit of affiliate commission, very, very little, but it just shows them that I'm helping reach other people and showing other landlords there are fantastic tools out there that are super awesome that are free. And he'll explain all that, how he became a part of that. He started this website called Landlordology.com. Cozy bought that from him. Now he works for them. He really enjoys helping other investors. So it's been a great match working with him. And I also do have a YouTube video where he walks you through, or walks me, and you will be able to watch it, walks through the entire software of Cozy and helps us to see how amazing Cozy is and how easy it is to use and how it's going to make us even more money and save us money because it doesn't cost a penny. So go to the show notes page. Now this show notes page is masterpassiveincome.com/034. This is episode number 34 /034. I'll have the show notes on there, as well as I'll have the video of Lucas walking you through the entire process and everything that Cozy can do. And they're continually making it better and better. All right, and I hope you enjoy this interview I did with Lucas. Let's get started. All right, I am super excited to share with all of you today a gentleman that I met at a recent conference that I was at. His name is Lucas Hall. He is the founder of Landlordology, as well as he now works for Cozy. And Cozy is the software that I actually use, but we're not going to get into that right now. What I wanted to bring him on the show for was to show you that normal people start businesses buying real estate and then progress from there. And they build other businesses as well as just continue to build their own real estate rental property business. So without further ado, Lucas, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hi, Dustin. Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Great. So before we jump into everything about real estate, let's get to know who you are. So who are you? What do you do besides real estate and run your business? Do you have a wife? Do you have kids? What do you do for fun? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, wow. So I work for Cozy, as you mentioned. We build software. So I've always been kind of a tech guy, and I like to build things on the computer. So I've always been into graphics. I used to run a little web design business, but I currently work for Cozy, and we build software for landlords, and I use it myself, like you. I use it myself to manage my own properties, and some of which are 2,000 miles away. So it's kind of neat that I get to build something that I use in my day-to-day life as well. So on a personal level, though, I invest in real estate, but besides that, I like to snowboard. My wife and I just moved to Colorado. We have a 6-year-old daughter that we adopted from Ethiopia, and we have two doodles. One is a golden doodle, one is a Newfie doodle, which is a weird combination. But he's like a 100-pound puppy, which is pretty cool. And I love to hike. I love to get in the mountains and do fun stuff like that.
That's awesome. I'm a skier personally. I absolutely love skiing. I tried snowboarding when it first came out. And I started skiing, then tried snowboarding. It first came out for about 2 years. I started snowboarding and realized I enjoyed it, but I had more fun skiing for whatever reason. And so I went back to skiing. But what's fun is I have a really good friend of mine. When we were younger, we'd buy season passes, and half day I would ride skis and he'd ride his snowboards, and then at half day have lunch, and then I'd ride his snowboard, he'd ride my skis. So yeah, I'm right there with you.
That's awesome.
Now, did you move to Colorado for snowboarding?
Sort of, a little bit. I mean, I'm not that good, but I do feel like it's something that my wife and I have always enjoyed, and we've been traveling to the Colorado mountains to go skiing and snowboarding for the better part of 10 years. And we've always thought, well, if we ever wanted to live somewhere where we really enjoyed where we lived and the quality of life was great, we would want to live in the Denver area. So we finally just bit the bullet and said, you know what, we're going to do it. We're just going to do it. And we moved, just picked up and left, and we said, we'll figure it out. So we currently are building a house in the Denver area, and it actually settles next week, which is exciting.
Oh, congratulations. That's cool.
Thanks. Yeah.
Good. And so you said you adopted a daughter from Ethiopia. She's 6 years old now. That's fantastic. Good for you.
Yeah. We've had her for about 4 years, and she's just she's spunky and just so wonderful. So if you've ever considered adoption or ever thought about it, or maybe you haven't ever thought about it, it's just really just it's just a wonderful heart, and it's just something that is just beautiful, and it oftentimes gives back to the people who adopt rather than the people who were adopted. So I feel like I got more out of it than my daughter, which is hard to believe, but it's just wonderful. I encourage
Very,
it.
very cool. That's very encouraging. Very good. So, Lucas, so what got you started investing in real estate and rental properties? Like, what was it? You wanted to quit your job? Did you want to have more freedom, more money? What got you started?
A girl.
Oh, wow. That's the first time I've ever heard that.
Yeah, a girl. Seriously. So I liked this girl, that she was cute, and I saw her about once a week at this church function. And one time I just said, "Hey, how was your week going?" And it was just trying to get her to talk to me. And she said, "Oh, it was great. I bought a house." And I thought, "Oh, that's amazing." Like, I didn't quite know how to respond to it. I think she was 23 or 24 at the time. And I didn't know what to make of it. So I thought, well, this girl is like super smart because she bought a house and she's super pretty. And so I want to get to know her better. And so what I did, the next logical thing is I hired a real estate agent, and I said, let's go find a house in her neighborhood, and then I can do the same thing. I can go find, roommates to live with me, and they'll pay my mortgage, and I'll basically house hack it by the room, and I'll live there practically for free. And that's what she was doing. And I thought, I'll do the same thing and it'll impress her. So I did. I found a real estate agent, and I bought a house like 7 blocks from her, and did the same thing. I found a bunch of roommates, and they paid my mortgage. And that's essentially how I got started with my first rental property. But it actually has a great happy ending, because my evil master plan worked, because she was so impressed that we started dating, and then about 3 years later we got married.
That is super awesome. You said 3 years after you met, and she told you she had a property, and then you bought one. So 3 years went from when you met. Pretty
much 3 years. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
In normal circumstances, that would actually seem kind of stalkery. Like, I'm going to buy your house in your neighborhood just to get you to notice me. But, she was really into real estate, and so was her family. And so I think, where some girls like diamonds and jewelry, like the fact that I bought a house was really attractive to her too. So it played off our own interests and benefits. So it worked.
That is super awesome. It's a new way that I've never heard of getting a girl like that, but that is awesome. Very, very cool. So everybody listening, you heard Lucas mention house hacking, and house hacking is basically a way to buy a house and with the idea of eventually having it as a rental property, or like Lucas did, get people to move in with you and they pay your mortgage because they're paying you rent. And so I actually have a whole podcast episode. It's masterpassiveincome.com/016. That's the podcast show notes. I have show notes in there on how to house hack and start your rental property business. So if you want to learn that, you can go there and listen and learn all about that. But Lucas, great job. So from there, what was your next property? So it sounded like you got married. Did you have one property and she had one property? Did you guys buy another one before then individually? Like, what was the next steps?
So we each had our own properties, but eventually living with roommates kind of goes sour, right? I mean, in my case, it was a house on Capitol Hill in DC, and those row houses are like 100 years old. And in my case, it was a 6-bedroom house. So I had a lot of rooms, and I was able to fill those with just Craigslist roommates that ended up becoming friends, which was nice. But they were paying, maybe $600 or $700 a piece to have their own room, and then common areas that they would share. And it was amazing, because it really did profit. It really did cash flow better than a single family home that I just run into, like a single family unit. And that was great, but eventually I got tired of living with people. I got tired of living with 5 other guys. And so I took the equity that I had in the house, and I decided I'm going to go buy a studio. And I bought a studio right next to the metro stop, and it was 2 blocks from the Congress buildings and the Senate. And it just, I knew that I could fill it with interns and Capitol Hill employees, and it was just kind of a hot spot. So I rented a studio, and with the intent to eventually make that another rental. So I took the equity out of the other house, put a very small down payment on a studio that I was living in as my primary residence, and then lived there until I got married to this girl. And so I had 2 properties before we got married, and she had 1. and from there I knew I could move out and then rent it for a profit too. So by the time I got married, we had a total of 3 properties that were cash flowing that we could add into our portfolio and then continue to build on that.
Good for you. That's great. I didn't start investing until after we got married, and I had to talk my wife into actually buying her first property with me. And so that was a whole big ball of wax. Her dad was a retired teacher. Her mom was a stay-at-home mom. They were very risk averse, and so buying a house for investment was just completely not normal. It's like something crazy people do, and so that was a lot of work. So you had a little easier than I did in order to get the first property and then the subsequent properties.
Sure. Yeah. And, I grew up the same way as your wife. I actually grew up thinking that you bought one house and that was the one house you lived in for the rest of your life. Like that was it, because I saw my grandparents do that. I saw my parents do that. And that's all I knew. And it wasn't until I met this girl that I ended up marrying that it kind of blew that out of the water. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And then I started realizing, geez, I could cash flow. Like I love cash flow. Like I like rental income. Like I can do this, this is easy. So. And
that's terrific. And I caught something, and hopefully the other listeners, all my listeners have heard and caught this. This was Washington, D.C., right?
Right.
So
this is in Washington, D.C., where houses are typically, average single family home is going to be $600,000 or $700,000.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Personally, I was living in California when I first started buying properties. I was living in Fresno, which is not the most expensive place. It's not San Francisco, it's not San Diego or Los Angeles, but it was still pricey. And so I thought, you know what? I want to buy a house in some place where it's relatively inexpensive or, compared to California. So I went to Ohio and bought a property in Ohio because I was like, man, these prices are too high. I would never have thought, let me buy a house in Washington, D.C. and make money for that. So that blows my mind that you are making money from properties, but you did mention how you did it and how you're doing it. So let's talk a little bit more about how your business model in buying someplace like DC. Like let's go over through a little bit things like how you found the property, how you bought it, like with financing or other ways. The size of the property. And what type of rents do you get? How much the expenses are? Just the numbers on the property. Can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. So let's start with the big 6-bedroom house that I have on Capitol Hill. So I knew that was a great area for renters. I knew it's where a lot of people come in right out of college and they want to live in community with other people. They're not so sure about having a place themselves yet, so they live with other people. And because the prices and the rent are high, they typically want to offload some of that cost to other people. So they're happy to live with roommates. And I knew that I could probably command a decent dollar for it. And the tricky part about it was that I had heard about the standard equations. I'd heard about the math that you're supposed to follow when you're buying a rental property. And, commonly there's like the 1% rule where, if a house, let's say the house purchase price is $100,000, then you would need to get about $1,000 in rent, which is 1%, right, a month, and that would make a profitable and a good investment, right? That would pay for itself. But in DC, okay, so let's say the house is $600,000. Am I really going to be able to get? $600,000. Am I really going to be able to get $6,000 a month for a house? And generally speaking, the answer is no. Like a renter's not going to, a group or a family isn't typically going to pay $6,000. So what I figured out was that in high rent areas and high density cities like DC and San Francisco and LA and New York, if it's not necessarily a percentage game, it's a bedroom game. So that particular house that I have will probably never cater to a single income family or even a dual income family, because even a dual income family isn't going to want to pay, $5,000 or $6,000. They're going to want to pay about $3,500. So what I can do though is I can convert a basement into 2 extra bedrooms, and I can, legally get those certified, and then I can have a total of 6 bedrooms in this house. And I can rent it to groups of roommates who might want to live together, and there's 6 people, and they each pay about $800 or $900. And that they're all under one lease. They all pay me electronically, and they all can see everybody else's rent payments in the house, and they're considered one entity, one family per se. And so I'm able to get about $5,400 for that property. and my mortgage is about 4. And so after saving for expenses and capex and all that, I'm actually profiting anywhere from $800 to $1,000 a month, which is unheard of considering the prices of the rental property and just general property in Washington, D.C. But that's how I was able to make it work. And that's, it became a numbers bedroom game.
That's absolutely fantastic. That much money on one property in passive income is great. Now, are taxes, I'm going to take a quick tangent, are taxes really, really high in Washington, D.C., and is that calculated in your numbers?
They are. Yeah, they're incredibly high just because it's DC. But that's built into my PITI, and so I pay that with my mortgage. And the PITI insurance, taxes, and principal and interest all included is about $4,000 on that property, and
Got it.
And I'm able to get 54.
Got it. So with that $4,000, that was including all the principal, taxes, insurance. Very, very cool. So when you're looking at doing this business, this type of business, because I've always had an idea that renting to basically college students is really a rough proposition because, they could tear up the property, or, if you have multiple people in a property, you have the problem of who do I actually hold accountable? Do I hold everybody accountable? Do I hold one person accountable? How do I actually make sure that everything is done? How do we get the lease? How do I make sure the bedrooms are filled? All that sort of stuff. So the business model of having one family or one person sign on the lease and moving in is simple. Yours sounds much more complicated. Now, I'm going to ask you the question, is it complicated, number one? And number two, how do you actually do that to where you fill the properties, once, it turns over and you have a new, basically a vacant place and you got to get more tenants in there? How do you do that business process?
Great question. So I do it as if I were renting to a single family. So I treat it as one lease. I treat it as they're all part of one entity. And so the lease is under joint and several liability, which means that it's kind of like the Three Musketeers where it's all for one and one for all. So they are considered one unit. And if one roommate decides to get up and leave and, just disappear on the other ones are still responsible for the full rent amount. It doesn't mean that they can't pay that person's rent on their behalf. They have to. They're now under the lease. So I don't actually worry about those bedrooms. And in fact, I've had one at my wife's old property, the one that she bought originally. It's a 5-bedroom in the same area, and we've had the same lease essentially renewing over and over and over and over again for almost 6 years. And what ends up happening is there's, a few roommates who stick around year after year, and they just find friends and roommates through their networks to fill the other bedrooms. And then I add those to the lease at the renewal time or right at the time when they move in, and just modify the lease and keep it going. So, I never really worry about one bedroom being empty because that's not my responsibility anymore. That's the group's responsibility. And if they don't fill it, then they still have to make up for the rent. Alternatively, though, with trying to rent to college students, I actually don't really consider them college students. Then I don't actually rent to people who are in school. I rent to people who are typically right out of school and looking for their first job, and they move to DC and with stars in their eyes, and they're working for a congressman or somebody, and they typically love it. They love being in a high density area. They love being in a cute neighborhood. And they typically want to kind of grow up. I know that sounds weird, but in college, it's like the mentality is I'm only here for a short time. But now that they're out of college, they typically try to keep the property nice. They want a place that they can be proud of, and I don't have a lot of problem with it. The only thing that does come up from time to time is that when I do have a group that does leave in full, like I know they're all leaving, none of them are renewing, then they typically don't clean as well as they normally should, or a normal house, normal group of tenants would. So I do have to usually get in there, spend about double that I would normally would on cleaning. I usually have to, replace things, like sometimes toilets just need to be replaced, or sometimes there's like a few extra holes in the walls. But, considering the rent that I'm getting, it's all easily done, and I have a group of contractors that I've worked with for years that they know what to do. They get in and they fix it up, and it's inexpensive and it's clean and done.
That's great. Now, is that something that you would continually look for more properties in the DC area to do something similar, or you want to keep replicating that model?
I think not. I like that model, and it was good for a time, and there's certainly a lot of profit in it. But that property will always be a group house property. It will never be able to convert to a single or dual income family unit. And as a result, I typically have to not for that one property, but for ones like it, I typically have to find new tenants every 1 to 2 years. And so if I can, my other houses that have single families in them, sometimes it's like 5 years before I have to find a new tenant. And so that's the lifestyle I'm trying to find now. And that's the lifestyle I'm trying to build with my rental portfolio, is one that's more hands off and one that I can trust that I have a good tenant for a number of years and not have to worry about it, every year and a half.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So usually, I wouldn't say usually, almost every single person that starts investing, the first property is the hardest one to buy. It's always, you're worried about losing money. Obviously, everybody's worried about that. You're worried about the furnace going out. You're worried about, liability. You're worried about lots of stuff. So what was it like, and what was going through your head as you bought your first property and then made the decision to buy it, and then once you're done with it? And was it really hard to buy your first property? Like, tell us about that first property.
So when I bought my first property, it was 2005. And so around that time, like, banks and mortgage lenders were passing out money to anybody who was breathing. So, I was not hard pressed to find a loan that was 100% financing or close to it. And that's actually how I got my first property. Now, that is not possible in today's market. And the closest you can get is a FHA 3.5% down mortgage, where you only have to come up with 3.5%. And I think that's actually a really good alternative and a really great way to get your foot in the door. Is you find something and you just come up with 3.5% of the purchase price, and you'll get an FHA insured mortgage that you'll be able to use as your primary residence, and then eventually you can move from that and turn it into a rental. And that's a great way, if you're looking to get in the door, that's a great way to get your first property.
I completely agree. In my house hacking podcast, that's exactly the best way that I tell people is anybody can save up, just a 3.5% down. You just got to save. You just got to work hard towards saving. But then you only 3.5% down. It's not like 20% down, which is normal conventional loan. Mm-hmm. And so it's a great resource for people who want to get started. And house hacking, like you did, is great. So was it hard to get past that initial thought, buying that first property? I know you said back in 2005, they were giving out loans like if you were breathing,
right,
which is completely agree. But was there much concern that you would actually get it rented, or was it that, hey, my scenario is I'm having people move in with me, and so it'll be fine?
Yeah, it was scary. Even though I had just watched my now wife back then, I had just watched her do it. Like, I had just watched her buy this house and fill it with roommates and renovate it, and then she was living basically for free. Like, even though I saw that, it was still, there was this mental barrier, because I thought, oh man, $600,000 is a lot of money. And when I tell my parents about it, they're going to freak out, because I think they bought their first house for like $68,000. And the fact that I'm buying something that big, they're probably thinking I'm committing financial suicide. So, there was these voices in the back of your head, and you just have to say, listen, it's a math equation. I know most purchases are essentially, 10% math and 90% heart, and that's part of the problem. And you just kind of have to put it aside and say, listen, I'm going to be an investor. I'm going to make money on this, and I'm going to choose wisely. And you just trust in your ability to learn how to do it and do it right. And you just got to take the leap, because I think the hardest thing is that taking action. And if you can sit there and learn and learn and learn and learn and learn, but if you don't actually take action to do something, call that mortgage broker, call a real estate agent, just start going around looking at properties with that agent, and making phone calls, then, you're never going to do it. But once you start taking those little baby steps and taking those little tiny actions, eventually you'll have a house. It's that easy.
That's great. I always try to explain to all my students and the people listening that it is actually fairly simple. Like, the process of doing it, it's simple. Once you've bought your first property, all the other ones are very, very similar. I mean, there's nothing that's really, really hard. If somebody has an elementary school education in math, they can run all the numbers. Now it's just getting the guts to actually pull the trigger and do it. So yeah, I completely agree. Just taking those baby steps to get there is a great, great idea.
Yeah, right on.
So where are you investing now, and are you investing now, and what do you see yourself, your real estate business in the future?
Ooh, that's a fun question. So I just moved to Colorado, and I have maybe this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. I have a mental block, and I think that mental block is that I like to invest in the cities that I live in. I like to be on the ground. I like to be able to go drive by the property that I want to buy and, scope it out and kind of check it out at different times of day and do all this, on the ground research for something. And that's good, but it's not necessary. Like I know a lot of investors who invest out of state or out of town and they do just fine. And so I think it's a little bit of me being a control freak that I think I want to invest in Denver because that's where I live. But I'm trying actually to get into a little bigger of an asset class. So instead of single family homes, which are fun and I love them, I want to explore multifamily and especially the large multifamily. So I've been looking a lot into apartment syndication, which is an interesting beast. But for me, I'm actually considering investing in an apartment purchase that I know someone else I know is doing, and I'm considering just kind of being passive and maybe putting $25,000 in instead of having to buy, a $200,000 house. Maybe I can test the waters with $25,000, and that's my way of taking action in a different class of property and just kind of getting past that mental barrier of investing where I'm not, because this particular apartment complex that is being purchased is in Fort Worth, Texas, and I've never been to Fort Worth, Texas, so that's pretty cool. So that's what I'm trying to do. I will probably, in all honesty, I will probably buy, a single family home or a duplex here in Denver, just because once you start doing it, it's hard to stop. It's like an addiction a little bit. So I will probably end up doing that sometime in the next couple of years. But anyway, I've got my hand in a couple different jars.
That's great. And you're really in progressing to multifamily. Think about the game Monopoly. Monopoly is a fantastic game to teach just money sense, but then also how to build wealth. I mean, you start with single family homes because those are the easiest ones to buy. You can get the best financing. You don't have to have a lot of experience. Actually, you can have no experience doing that. But you buy a single family home and then you keep buying more and buying more. And then you trade those in. You buy an apartment complex, something that's maybe four units or 8 units or something that's bigger. And then you keep trading up and you keep buying more and more and more. And over time, if you just keep doing it, your wealth will be substantially greater because you're buying multifamilies, because multifamilies are seen as a business as opposed to just a property. And so how much money brings in is how much the property's worth. So all that to say, yeah, apartment complexes are great. So good for you. Hopefully that works out with this place in Fort Worth, Texas. That would be really, really cool to see how that works out. So I'm
looking forward to it. It's a great way. Sure.
Great. So what are your favorite things about rental properties? Like, is it the passive income, the cash flow that comes in? Is it that it gives you control over your life where you don't really have to, answer to a boss every single day? Like, what are your favorite things about rental properties?
So I haven't found another investment that gives back as much as rental properties do. So let me explain. So I like rental properties for a number of reasons. One is they cash flow. If you purchase them correctly, they cash flow. So over the course of the life of that mortgage, let's just assume you buy a 30-year mortgage. Over that 30 years, your tenants are going to be paying you rental income and they're going to be paying your mortgage. So that rental income hopefully will cover the mortgage, then some. And so you'll get to keep whatever net profit you have, which is fantastic. But then they'll eventually pay your mortgage off. So that mortgage is getting paid off, and you're also capturing depreciation and other tax benefits as you go along. And then at the end of that 30 years, assuming you hold on to it the whole time, then you get to either keep or sell a paid-for property and reap all the benefits from that as well. So I just can't get over the fact that it almost pays for itself 3 times over. And it's an asset that continues to grow in wealth. So hopefully by the time you pay that mortgage off or you have it free and clear, it's worth double or even triple what it was worth when you bought it. So I haven't found anything quite like that. Even stocks and mutual funds are great, but they're not quite that good and they're not quite that fun, and it's something that I could actually give to tenants and say, like, here, you can make a home out of this. Like, you can live a life here and raise families. And it's it just gives back in more ways than any other investment I've found.
I completely agree with you. It's just amazing how rental properties really benefit you as well as your tenants as well. If you're taking care of the property, you don't want to be like a slumlord and not have good properties, which anybody that has worked with me, I definitely make sure we have good properties that we want, or tenants want to live in there. So right on. And we want to be able to give back because we're being blessed and benefited by the tenants paying off the mortgage and paying us money that goes in our pockets. So good. So now with your business that you've had, have you had any failures? And can you give us one failure that you've had that really sticks in your mind and something that we can learn from?
Yes. So I used to buy condos. And so because they were cheaper in DC and, I could buy a condo for $200,000 to $300,000 rather than a house for $600,000 to $700,000. And they were just more affordable when I was strapped for cash. And so I could do that. But I learned that condos are really not oftentimes the best rental investments because they're burdened with heavy condo fees. There's an HOA that controls what you can and cannot do. And if you're using it and you're counting on it as a rental property, then that HOA can change the laws and change the rules for that association overnight. And they can just say, we're not going to do rentals anymore, or we're only going to allow 30% occupancy for rentals, and then it has to be 70% occupancy for homeowners. And, and all that could just change on a dime, and you can't do anything about it. And then on top of it, I don't think they appreciate it as well. So I had a property that we bought for $330,000, and after 12 years, sold it for $370,000. That's
wow.
$40,000. And we ended up making a little bit more because of all the depreciation over the 12 years and how much we've paid off over the time. So the debt was a little bit less, but $40,000 is nothing for 12 years on that amount of cash. So, that was not a good investment. And I learned that it was because I wasn't making anything monthly on that property. I was really just breaking even. And then at the end of the day, it didn't appreciate and it was risky. So I'll probably never invest in individual condos again. Just because they don't have the growth potential that a single family home or a duplex or a multifamily, building might have.
That's a great lesson. I recently had another interview, gentleman, an investor named Michael, and he had a run-in with an HOA. And so as he was buying the property, this was in Las Vegas. As he was buying the property, he read through the HOA, but missed something in HOA documents. He signed the documents, bought the property, getting ready to fix it up and rent it out. And he gets notified that he cannot rent out. Like, he cannot rent out the property because the HOA forbids it. He's barred from renting out the property. So what he bought it to do, he literally could not because it's a contract. So he was, it was really, really rough. And so he was able to sell the house and then buy one, like literally across the street with a different HOA, and he was able to rent it out. So it was rough. So HOAs are very, very rough. So I actually, like literally in my own house, I live in an HOA neighborhood, and they sent me a letter saying, you need to paint your house. I said, I need to do what? You're telling me I have to paint my house? Like, my house looks fine. But no, it's fading on this one spot here, so you have to paint the entire thing. Anyways, wow. HOAs are rough, so you want to watch out for those. So that's definitely a good lesson now.
Yep, for sure. Man, you had to paint your house.
Yeah. Okay, so that probably touched on it, but a question I usually like to ask is, looking back, obviously condos is one thing, but other things that you might think of your younger self, like before you even started investing, before you met your then, before your wife, but before you actually met her, when you were thinking about just business in general or life in general, what would you go back and tell your pre-investing self about real estate and what to watch out for, what to do?
Oh, wow. I would tell myself that real estate is the primary means to make money in the United States of America, and that if I would tell myself to focus on that in all honesty, but I would also tell myself to diversify my portfolio outside of real estate. So I do believe that real estate is awesome, but I love it. But what I would do is if I were, let's say, 22, and I could go back and talk to my 22-year-old self, I would say, hey, listen, I want you to take $2,000 a month, and I want you to just put it in, a mutual fund or a group of mutual funds until you're 30, and keep doing $2,000 a year until you're 30, and then stop. And then I want you just to then focus completely on real estate and buy properties that make financial sense, and you do the math on them and make sure that they work before you buy them, because I think that's often something that most people, including myself, have skipped from time to time, where you just don't do the math as well as you should. But do the math and invest at any opportunity you can, and hold those puppies as long as you can, and because you'll see those rewards reaped. And meanwhile, you've got this little basket of mutual fund investments that will potentially be, anywhere from $1 to $3 million by the time you hit retirement. So, that little bit of investing you can do up front and then let it compound over the rest of your life while you invest in real estate will just give you two huge nest eggs that you can rely on either one of them. And if one of them fails or one of them blows up, you've got the other one. And that's what I would tell myself if I were going back in time.
Good points. That is fantastic. So similar to that, hypothetically, if you were to have to start all over again and you had $1,000 in your pockets and no properties, but you had all your experience, all your knowledge, what would you do to get back on your feet?
$1,000. I would save it. Honestly, I would use that as an emergency fund, because if I only had $1,000, I wouldn't invest it. I would set it aside in case something happens medically wise or health wise. And I would I'd go get as many part-time jobs as I possibly could if I didn't have a really good full-time job. And I would just work my tail off until I was able to save up about 3 to 6 months worth of savings and expenses for housing and whatnot. And I would to get back on my feet, I would build up a little tiny emergency fund and then make it a bigger emergency fund. And then I would start maybe considering investing. I wouldn't spend that money on anything. I would keep it just in case something bad happened.
That's a great point. A lot of people think about, hey, my life is changing. Either I'm making a little bit of money, like if they buy one property and they have a little bit of money coming in their pocket, like $250 a month, let's just go ahead and go spend that. Or, I have a little bit of savings. Let me just go buy a car, or let me go spend it. Well, saving is one thing that really helps people get wealthy and stay wealthy. I mean, the reason why I have wealth is because I don't spend it willy-nilly. And so I think you're absolutely right. So that's a great point that we got to be saving. But at the same time, I liked what you said, that you would get as many part-time jobs as you needed to, number one, to take care of yourself and your family, but then also so that you can have an emergency fund and then build your business from that. So, if you work hard, you can absolutely do it.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, you got to hustle. I mean, if you don't have anything, you got to hustle. That's the only thing you can do.
Yeah. Great. So we're wrapping it up, this interview. So Lucas, what non-real estate book would you recommend to everyone that they should read?
Oh, wow. I'm not going to say Rich Dad, Poor Dad because everyone says that. But I think, I suppose that's real estate. But for me, the book that actually changed my perspective on real estate, and it was right around the same time I bought this house as well, and it actually changed my whole perspective on finances and personal financing, is just that it's called My Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. And it's a classic book. It's been on the New York Times bestseller list for a while and for years. And it just teaches you basic personal finance at a level that, maybe your grandma would teach you, where it's like, don't spend money if you don't have it, and make sure you save up that emergency fund because, I think Dave always says that, Murphy's going to move into your spare bedroom and then something's going to go wrong. And so I was a big fan of Dave Ramsey when I was in my 20s, and I still am, but I think that is a fantastic way to get started and make sure you have a nice little cushion just in case one of your investments doesn't work out and you lose that money. You at least have a nice savings account to back up on, and your family's not going to go hungry. That's essentially the most important thing. So check it out.
That's great, and that's very wise. I tell a lot of my students, actually all my students that I teach in real estate, who actually come across just a good amount of money all of a sudden. Like I've had some students that actually receive an inheritance of like $150,000, and they say, well, I really want to invest. And so I encourage them. I say, this is fantastic. You're well ahead of the game than most people, so this is going to be great. But one thing I want to give you is a little bit of insight that when you don't have any money, when you're building this up from your bootstraps and you are working hard, you fight for every penny. Like if you're putting an offer on a house that's $75,000 and that's what they're asking, well, you're going to offer $60,000 or $55,000 to try to get them to come down, because every penny you don't have, or you've worked hard for it. And so you know the value of the money that you're spending. But when you have $150,000. Well, you know what? They're asking 170, or they're asking 75. Let me go ahead and, offer them 70. I'll get them to come down a little bit. So you don't have that, you don't have that financial understanding underneath your belt that, don't spend too much money, or don't spend money you don't have, or, negotiate for everything, or fight for every penny. A penny saved is penny earned. All the great wisdom that comes from just, building up your business. You need to actually be aware that could be a potential downfall, because, somebody's going to, when I didn't have any money and I had something to fix my car, I had the catalytic converter or something go out, I would fight for every penny. But now that I have money, I'm like, okay, let's just go get it done. First place, let's just go take it and get it done. Well, that's not the best idea, because you could save money and then use that money to invest. So good. I'm definitely going to be putting that book, Dave Ramsey's book, in the show notes. I've read it myself, and really, really great stuff. So anybody who's looking to invest, make sure you have good financial sense inside of you, so that when you do start making money, you still have that good financial sense. And, it's a sad thing, but any pro player of NFL or NBA, it seems like more often than not, as soon as they start making money, they go out and spend it right away. And as soon as they stop playing because they get injured or whatever it might be, they get cut, then they're broke, and they did not use that money wisely. So I'm not saying all of them, but just it seems like it has happened quite a bit. But well, anyways, so Lucas, tell us about Cozy and Landlordology, how you went from Landlordology, and I believe you sold that. And, can you tell us about that?
Sure. So landlordology.com was my little internet baby, right? So I decided that I was going to teach other people how to be a landlord. I was doing something right. I had a bunch of family and friends coming to me asking me what I was doing right and wanted to get into real estate. And I thought, I could just write all this down. And so it was kind of one of those things where I just started blogging my heart out. And the website was designed to give you everything you need to know about being a landlord and how you can be more profitable, more ethical, just a better business owner. And it started getting really popular, and Google started rewarding it with like page one search results on a lot of different keywords, and it started getting a lot of attention. And around that time, I had a couple companies contact me and just say, hey, you're doing something right. And one of which was Cozy, and they had just gotten started around the same time I did with Landlordology. And they said, you're trying to help improve the rental industry through education, and we're trying to help improve the rental industry through software. We're doing the same thing, just with different mediums. So why don't we just talk about acquiring the brand and then hiring you to be part of Team Cozy, and then you can continue to do what you love. And around that same time, it was just perfect, because I was working a full-time job during the day and then working on Landlordology at night. And we were getting ready to adopt a little girl. And I knew that when she came home, I would need to bond with her and spend a lot of time with her. And so working for Cozy allowed me to go from two jobs to one, and then it also let me work from home so I could really be with her. And so it was just, a lot of blessings right around the same time. And so I joined Team Cozy, and I just thought, Cozy is doing it right. Even from the beginning, before I even talked to them, I thought, if there's anybody out there that I would love to be a part of, it would be them, because they seem to really get this idea of what independent landlords need. And Cozy got its start back in 2012 when we got some seed money from Google, and we said, basically we want to democratize all these really expensive tools that big property managers have, and we want to give them to landlords, kind of like Robin Hood, right? I mean, take them and give them away and try to make it free, and give these landlords the same tools and assets that property managers have, and make it so that they can manage their own properties, and they wouldn't have to hire really expensive property managers who take anywhere from 10 to 18% of the annual rent. And so we started building this tool, and it started out with rent collection, but now you can do everything from soup to nuts. So you can list a property for rent. You can find tenants and screen those tenants or credit reports and background checks. And then you can, once you find somebody, you can roll them right into online rent payments and get them set up for that. And then after that, you can manage maintenance requests and track expenses and get reports. And then when you have a vacancy, you can start the process all over again. So it's really, truly a system that anybody can use. It's free for landlords. Cozy makes their money on the tenant. When the tenant is screened, when you want to screen a tenant with a credit report and background check, the tenant will pay for that as part of their application to the property. And so we make enough on those screening reports that we can give away everything else for free, including, online payments. So it's really quite amazing, and I use it myself to manage properties that are 2,000 miles away, and I don't need a property manager because of it.
That's great. I personally use Cozy. I've used other software applications, their online applications, and other ones that are free as well. But I've actually dumped the other ones because I had my tenants had so many problems, either with their bank accounts not working with the software, just many host of different problems. But now I use Cozy personally, and I've been using it for a little over a year now, maybe a little longer. And I think I have at least 9 or 10 properties with Cozy going through there. And I think I should be putting another one on there soon, because if I don't manage it myself, if I don't manage it myself, I have a property manager and they take care of all my other properties. But if there are some that I can go ahead and manage myself, which they're really self-running properties where I don't have a lot of hands-on, I manage it myself through Cozy, and so I fully endorse Cozy. I think they're terrific. I have not had any issues whatsoever, which other companies have had many issues. So if you guys would like to join Cozy, and remember, it's absolutely free for landlords. It's terrific. And the only way that they make money is really when they do a background check. And I would say highly recommend always do a background check. It'll, even if you have to pay, like I literally, in some of my states that I invest, the tenants would not pay because they were just, lower income tenants, and they wouldn't pay the background check. They wouldn't pay the $30, $35 or $25, whatever it might be. I knew that one eviction is going to cost me at least $1,500 in carrying costs, in eviction fees, in cleaning fees, and turnover, all this sort of stuff, that $1,500 to $200 to $2,000 or $2,500 for one eviction. And so doing a $35 at most, it's probably $25, $30, $35 background check has saved me thousands of dollars. So absolutely make sure you do all the screenings, and you can also have the tenant pay for them, which is obviously strongly suggested. So if you'd like to go through Cozy, you can use my affiliate link. No cost to you, obviously, because it's definitely free, but it'll help me out. They give me a little bit of a kickback to refer you over to them. Go to their website, Cozy, COZY.co/Dustin. And if you go there, it'll give me a little bit of credit for you guys going over there. But again, it's completely free for you, and I absolutely love it. So, hey, Lucas, thank you so much for being on the show, giving us all your wisdom, and expressly telling us about meeting your future wife through real estate. That was terrific. And then as well as teaching us how to invest in Washington, D.C. of all places. So thank you very much for being on the show.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thank you for having me.
Now, wasn't that super awesome and crazy how somebody can buy a property in a crazy expensive, I think Washington, D.C. is worse than San Francisco or L.A. or New York. Like Washington, D.C., prices are crazy. But he's found a way, instead of renting to a single family, basically, a mom and dad with kids, or just, a small family, he rents it out to multiple people. Isn't that just crazy? So there are so many ways to invest in real estate. And here's something that I want to leave you with, is that you don't know what you don't know. There are many ways to invest in real estate. There's not just one way. There's so many different ways. And that's why I bring on other investors that have done things differently, so that you can see the amazing things that you can do, and you can change how you invest. You can say, hey, I have this problem. Let me figure out another way to solve that problem. I'll give you an example. I might have talked about in the past that there was one area of the country that was doing really, really well. Like I was investing, it was doing really well 10 years ago. Well, slowly over time, the crime in that city started reaching over into the area that I invest. And little by little, the area went downhill. And so now it has more crime. And so what I've been doing now is I've been doing a rent to own. So people didn't want to rent. And so instead of just renting, I do a rent to own. So I'll probably do a whole podcast episode on rent to own. It's absolutely fantastic and help my business be so much more stable, and I'm blessing people with homes. So there are so many different ways. But again, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know that there are terrific ways to invest in real estate, even if you may be stuck against the wall where you have too many expenses and not enough income. We may be able to figure out a way to get it done. So get somebody that's going to help you. And recently, I've been blessed to work with a number of students that I've been able to help them develop a plan and figure out how to start investing wherever they are. If they have a lot of debt or very little income, no savings, whatever it might be, I've been able to do that with them. And so if you're interested at all in coaching, go to my website, masterpassiveincome.com. At the very top, you'll see a button that says coaching. Click on that. I'd love to work with you if you have any desire to learn. The coaching comes with my Ultimate Real Estate Investing course. So let's get started. Let's get you changing your life with real estate rental properties. And so remember that link to get cozy for free and be affiliated with me, Cozy, COZY.co/Dustin. All right, guys, thank you so much for being here with me. I really, really appreciate you guys. If you can, go ahead and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. It really helps to get more people interested in real estate and changing their lives, because everything gets better when you have passive income. It's just absolutely amazing. Once you get that first check of $250 or $350 a month from your rental property, you will be sold. All right, guys, thanks for being here. I'll see you next week. See you soon. Peace out.